At exactly 10 a.m. local time, U.S. surveillance forces tracked a boat tearing across the eastern Pacific at nearly 50 knots. A normal fishing boat rarely tops 12 knots, maybe 14 on a good day with calm seas. This wasn't fishing. This was a go-fast boat operated by smugglers, and the men on board had no idea they'd already been spotted hours ago. Inside the craft, 5 smugglers moved with practiced confidence. They'd run this route before. 18 times, same boat, same routine, same protection money paid to the right people. To them, it felt like just another day on the job. Beneath the blue tarps lay 3,000 pounds of cocaine bundled with 100 pounds of pure fentanyl. On the black market, the haul was worth roughly $120 million. The fentanyl alone carried the potential for hundreds of thousands of lethal doses if it reached North American cities. If the run had succeeded, each man might realistically have walked away with roughly $4 to $6 million, enough to disappear forever. The helmsman checked his GPS, adjusting course with calm precision, north-northeast. To the smugglers, nothing felt complicated. A few more hours of ocean ahead, then hand off the cargo to a mothership or unload quietly on shore. 4 Mercury outboards roared at full throttle, driving the boat across empty ocean just 140 miles off the coast. No other vessel in sight, only endless blue water and what the crew believed was freedom. But 2 hours earlier, at 8 a.m., an HC-130J Super Hercules had already marked them. From 25,000 feet, its AN/APS-154 advanced radar swept a 200-mile radius, tracking every contact. This vessel stood out like blood on snow. Wrong speed, wrong lane, no AIS transponder. 3 strikes. Then the optics locked on, zooming in until every tarp, every movement of the crew was visible in sharp relief. What looked like freedom was already a countdown. Do you think the smugglers had any idea they were already being tracked? Comment your guess yes or no. The sensor operator switched to the Star Sapphire 380 HDC electro-optical system. Even from 140 miles away, the lens revealed the smugglers' world in sharp detail. 4 outboards bolted across the stern, tarps stretched over a low deck, and 5 men moving with the ease of routine. At 9:45, something changed. The zigzag pattern, the standard cartel playbook, ended. The boat locked its nose north, engines screaming. Either they were overconfident or they were burning more fuel than they realized. Fuel math gave the verdict. Each Mercury 300 burns about 25 gallons per hour wide open. 4 engines together consume 100 gallons an hour. Their tank carried maybe 400 gallons total. 2 hours of running had already drained half. That left barely 2 hours of fuel. Their rendezvous was still 3 hours away. Physics was not on their side. Meanwhile, the helicopter could stay airborne for 4 hours straight, and if needed, refuel on Kimball before returning to the chase. At the command center, data was transmitted over Link 16 to the Joint Task Force South in Key West, to DEA liaisons studying cartel patterns. Analysts compared behavior, aggressive routing, evasive maneuvers, high-risk cargo profiles. This wasn't some wild gamble. They might be linked to La Sombra Negra, a gang that had ambushed a coastal patrol 2 weeks earlier, killing 6 officers. They were likely armed and more willing to fight than surrender. That possibility changed the mood in the room. That was when the order came down. The encrypted sat phone crackled and a commanding voice cut through. "This is Admiral Thomas Green, Pacific Command. You are authorized to launch airborne interdiction. Do not let that vessel escape. Repeat, intercept and disable. The nation is watching." It was the kind of statement that erased all doubt. The smugglers weren't facing a routine patrol. They were up against the full weight of U.S. maritime law enforcement. Before we continue, hit that like button to support stories that expose the real cost of the drug trade. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. At 1100 hours, the flight deck of the cutter Kimball came alive. Twin turbine engines roared as the MH-65E Dolphin lifted into the air, its fuselage painted bright orange against the gray Pacific. But this wasn't the standard search and rescue helicopter most people recognize. This one had been reconfigured for a single mission: interdiction. Mounted gun ports, reinforced avionics, extra fuel tanks. purpose-built to stop boats that refused to stop. The pilot banked hard east, climbing to 3,000 feet where the helicopter's range was most efficient. In the back, the aerial gunner ran his checks, hands moving through muscle memory. M240B mounted, Barrett M107 secured, optics calibrated, laser designator aligned. This was a routine they had drilled thousands of times, but each mission carried the same gravity. Real engines, real smugglers, real stakes. 20 minutes into the flight, the co-pilot spotted it. A thin white rooster tail stretching half a mile behind a dark speck on the ocean. 4 Mercury 300 outboards screaming at redline, throwing water into the sky like chalk dust. From 500 feet up, they began the compliance phase. The long-range acoustic device, LRAD, powered on, its speakers projecting commands louder than a rocket launch. Stop your vessel. Prepare to be boarded. This is the United States Coast Guard. The words were carried in both English and Spanish, but down below, the smugglers ignored them. Rotor wash tore at the sea, spray lashed across the deck, but the throttle stayed pinned. Beneath the tarpaulin lay 3,000 pounds of cocaine stacked beside 100 pounds of pure fentanyl, a lethal cargo valued at nearly $120 million. For every man on board, that haul carried a heavy price, a 40-year prison sentence if caught. To surrender was to face decades behind bars. Running meant millions. With that kind of payout on the line, they chose to run. It was a wager they were willing to take. What they didn't know was that the helicopter circling overhead had already dealt with many, many runners just like them. Want more missions where America takes the fight to the cartels? Subscribe and hit the bell. For 15 minutes, the helicopter blasted warnings, flares, sirens, loudspeakers, yet the smugglers showed no sign of compliance. The pilot radioed the Kimball requesting permission to fire warning shots. The reply came back at once, approved. The rules of engagement were unambiguous. Any vessel that refused to stop in international waters would be dealt with. The gunner moved into position behind the M240B, a machine gun capable of spitting out 650 rounds per minute. The M240B barked to life, tracers hammering the water just meters ahead of the Go Fast's bow. Each burst sprayed fountains of seawater, the hammering echo bouncing off the horizon. Any sane crew would stop here. But these men doubled down. Engines howled higher, the boat weaving port and starboard, desperate to shake the helicopter's shadow. After 3 volleys of warning fire, the outcome was clear. The smugglers had no intention of stopping. The pilot reported flatly, "Subjects non-compliant." The response came back without hesitation. "Authorized, engage." The gunner set the M240B aside and shouldered a weapon built to punish. Automatic rifle chambered in .50 BMG. This was no mere swap of tools. It was a declaration, from warning to surgical obliteration of mobility. The mission had escalated from talk to decisive, crippling force. He was a member of HITRON, the Helicopter Interdiction Tactical Squadron out of Jacksonville, the only airborne law enforcement unit on the planet cleared to execute what's called airborne use of force. HITRON doesn't play at interdiction. They hunt, disable, and break smuggling chain. Since 1998, HITRON crews have executed more than 500 interdictions, cutting over $7.6 billion from cartel supply chains. These operators aren't ordinary aviators. They are predators trained to kill engines mid-flight over violent seas. Selection begins with the top 1% of Coast Guard marksmen. Training is merciless, firing from moving platforms in Sea State 4, reading the rhythm of the ocean, sinking breath with rotor vibrations. The physics they master are ruthless. The helicopter moves at 50 knots on 3 axes, pitch, roll, yaw, while the target races at 50 knots on a different vector. Ocean swells add vertical motion to both platforms. Wind deflects bullets. Engine vibration distorts aim. Salt spray fogs optics. Most snipers fire from stable ground at still targets. HITRON gunners do the opposite. They aim for engines, not people. Sinking a boat destroys evidence and creates a maritime emergency. A boat with no engines becomes a floating crime scene, perfect for processing. Engines are large and fragile. They are the logical weak point. Shooter leaned into the harness, eyes behind the EOTECH sight, crosshairs steady against the chaos of wind and rotor vibration. He had done this before, hundreds of times in training, dozens in combat. The first round snapped free, a thunderclap rolling through the sky. Half a second later, the starboard outer engine exploded in a cloud of shrapnel and oil. The go-fast speed dropped instantly, 50 knots to 38. Second shot, port outer engine, severed fuel lines, killed the pump. Speed dropped again, 25 knots, the hull starting to wallow in the swells. Third shot, starboard inner engine, punched clean through, tearing components apart. The smugglers clung to hope on a single engine, staggering forward at 12 knots. The fourth round ended it. The last Mercury detonated in a burst of smoke and spray. The go-fast slowed to a crawl, then to nothing. Dead in the water. No engines, no options, no escape. And now, the cutter Kimball finally launched her response. Two 7-meter rigid-hull inflatable boats hit the water, each pushed by 470 horsepower diesels. Spray peeled off their bows as they accelerated toward the target in a classic pincer maneuver. 12 operators of Tactical Law Enforcement Team South were on board, men trained not for routine patrols but for opposed boardings in hostile seas. They closed the distance at 45 knots, hulls slamming through the swells. Each operator wore level 4 body armor with flotation built in, visors down against the spray, carbons ready. M4A1 rifles slung across chests, sidearms holstered, less lethal options within reach. From above, the MH-65E hovered, its rotors throwing down a storm, overwatch steady, guns still trained. At 10 meters, the lead boat veered, taking an oblique angle on the smuggler's stern. The coxswain held position perfectly despite the rolling chop. Then came the voice, sharp, commanding, unmistakable. "Hands where we can see them!" The order cut across wind and waves, carried by sheer authority. 5 men froze on deck. They were staring at rifles leveled from 2 directions. Slowly, hands went up, the universal signal of surrender. One by one, they were ordered to their knees, then to their bellies. Operators vaulted over the gunnels, weapons covering every angle, restraints snapping into place with metallic finality. But the seizure was only half the battle. Beneath those blue tarps lay 3,000 pounds of cocaine and nearly 100 pounds of pure fentanyl, enough to produce tens of thousands of lethal doses. That much poison could cripple entire communities if it ever reached American streets. The engines were gone, but the vessel itself couldn't be allowed to linger. A dead go-fast adrift was a hazard and a beacon. The decision came quickly. The operators stripped what they needed, then spread accelerant across the deck. A single flare arced through the night air and landed square on the wood. Within seconds, orange fire raced along the hull. The smugglers, cuffed and silent, watched their million-dollar promise turn to ash. The crew of the Kimball watched too, knowing this was the cleanest end. No chance of salvage, no risk of another cartel team recovering the load. Just a bonfire on the Pacific. The inflatable boats turned back toward the cutter, prisoners aboard, smoke trailing behind them like a final exclamation mark. The mission had shifted from pursuit to custody, from firepower to paperwork. But in that transition lay the true victory. 5 men captured, evidence preserved, and a chain of destruction broken before it reached American streets. Now type HITRON if you want more missions like this. By the time the cutter Kimball hauled in the prisoners, the ocean behind them still smoked from the wreckage. What had been a sleek cartel go fast was now nothing more than charred debris slipping beneath the waves. Nearly $120 million went into fire. Hundreds of million lethal doses were erased before they could reach American streets. The smugglers sat shackled on deck, their faces blank, staring at a horizon that would never again mean freedom. They weren't the first crew to gamble on speed against patience, and they wouldn't be the last. But for them, the game was over. Federal prosecutors would build the case, DEA would document the chain of custody, and the Coast Guard would file one more successful interdiction into the record books. For the Coast Guard, the lesson was clear. Technology, training, and coordination win. From the AN/APS-154 radar aboard the Hercules, to the Barrett M107 in the hands of a HITRON gunner, to the tactical teams boarding under rotor cover, every layer worked as designed. It was proof that interdiction wasn't just possible, it was repeatable. Since its inception, HITRON has conducted over 500 successful engine disable missions, stripping billions of dollars from cartel supply lines. Each case is different, but the message remains the same. In the open ocean, there is no escape from precision and patience. The ocean swallowed the last of the burning wreck. The prisoners were processed, and the mission closed with one undeniable truth. Sometimes the most decisive victories aren't fought in deserts or cities, but on blue water, where speed means nothing against watchful eyes above. If you believe missions like this protect our communities, hit like, share, and subscribe, because more untold stories from the front lines are coming. Type HITRON in the comments to honor the crews who risk everything to stop poison at sea.